Welcome to Amy Serrault's Tales of Tomorrow. Brought to you by the Asteroid Miners Guild of Sol 3, the Sparkly Rock Corporation, the League of Exquisite Toaster Bistros, and generous listeners like you, all around the planet Earth. Some program content is either in public domain, Creative Commons, or is believed to fall under the Fair Use Doctrine for non-commercial use for review or critique. Otherwise, it is copyright by Star Publishing. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Tales from Tomorrow, audiobook readings presented by the Sparkly Rock Corporation.
The floor vanished with a violent, sickening lurch, gravity reclaiming its ancient and unrelenting sovereignty over his body. His stomach surged into his chest cavity as he plummeted through the yawning maw of the cylinder, the air pressure shifting so rapidly it threatened to burst the capillaries in his eyes. Above him, the Zizks, those towering, multi-jointed silhouettes of chitinous plates and pulsing bioluminescence, loomed like weeping willows made of obsidian and wet meat. They watched with a detached clinical interest, their primary sensory organs vibrating at a frequency that rattled the very marrow of his bones. He didn't scream. Not at first. The shock was too profound, a cold curtain falling over his nervous system as he hurtled toward the blinding white light at the base of the pit. It wasn't a spiritual glow. It was the searing radiance of high-intensity thermal processors, the industrial furnace where the meat was prepared for the banquet. He could smell it now, a cloying metallic stench of ozone mixed with the sickly sweet aroma of rendered proteins and the sharp chemical sting of some alien preservative. His clothes, or what remained of them in this sterile nightmare, fluttered against his skin like dying birds. Every nerve ending was screaming, a white-hot choir of agony as the wind tore at his hair and whipped the moisture from his lips. He saw the faces of those who had come before him, pale, stretched masks of ecstasy and terror hanging from hooks in the periphery of the pit. They were the food, but to the Zizks, they were also a study in degradation. Then the physics of the room broke. A pulse of sapphire blue energy rippled through the air, not as a sound but as a physical pressure that flattened his hair against his skull and forced the breath from his lungs. The light at the bottom of the pit didn't just brighten, it inverted, turning into a vacuum of color that seemed to suck the very shadows off the walls. A crack like a thunderclap split the chamber. A wall of reinforced obsidian composite shattered inward, spraying shards of glass and pulverized stone across the Zizks' feeding table. From the breach came a hum, low, steady, and terrifyingly rhythmic. It was the sound of a heavy industrial heartbeat. Through the haze of dust and pulverized atmosphere, he saw them. They didn't look like the heroic knights of old pulp novels. They were sleek, matte gray silhouettes, encased in pressurized suits that looked like polished beetle shells. They moved with a predatory grace that made the Zizks look clumsy and slow. These were the harvesters, the vanguard of a species that had long since stopped asking for permission to occupy the stars. A tether of carbon fiber wire lashed out from the breach, hooking into the collar of his tunic. It didn't jerk. It caught him with the precision of an automated claw, arresting his fall in midair just feet above the furnace. Target secured, a voice crackled over an external speaker, distorted by a heavy layers of encryption and linguistic filters. It was a voice that had been stripped of its warmth, reduced to a purely functional delivery system for intent. Extraction pulse initiated. Scrub the site. The harvesters didn't pause to offer words of comfort or a steadying hand. They were machines of logistics. One moved with a blur of kinetic motion, planting a localized pulsometer on the floor. A wave of high-frequency vibration rippled outward, causing the Zizx's chitinous plates to fracture and their delicate sensory filaments to liquefy into gray sludge. The aliens didn't scream. They simply collapsed, their complex biology failing as the human technology systematically dismantled the fundamental chemistry of their environment. It was a surgical deletion of an entire biological niche. Within seconds, the man was being winched upward through the breach. He looked down one last time and saw the Zizx, the masters of this sector, the apex predators of this system, twitching in the debris. They weren't just dying, they were being erased. The harvesters moved with a chilling, industrial efficiency that suggested they would do this to every world, every species, every god that dared to put humanity on a menu. As he was pulled into the sterile interior of the extraction craft, the door hissed shut with a finality that felt like the closing of a tomb. The atmosphere inside smelled of recycled oxygen and high-grade disinfectant, the scent of human survival. He slumped against a bulkhead, his muscles twitching in the aftershock of the fall. A figure approached him, a harvester who had removed their helmet. The face beneath was unremarkable, a woman with tired eyes and a jagged scar running through her left eyebrow. She didn't smile at him. She simply checked a series of readings on a wrist-mounted display. "You were in the nursery," she said, her voice flat, yet carrying a strange weight. "The Zizx were trying to map your neural pathways while you were conscious. They wanted to see how much meaning they could extract before the cognitive collapse." He coughed, a thick glob of blood landing on his chest. "Why did you come for me? I'm just one man." She looked at him then, and for the first time a spark of something, not quite pity but a terrible kind of recognition, flickered in her eyes. She gestured toward the view screen as the ship breached the atmosphere, leaving the dying world behind. "We didn't come for you because you're special," she whispered. "We came because you were telling them stories." She pointed to the data feed on her console, the logs of his internal monologue that had been captured by the Zizx sensors during his fall. He saw it then, a scrolling ticker of his thoughts about the fly, the spider, and the god effect. "They were fascinated," she continued, her voice gaining a serrated edge. "They have lived for eons as pure biological imperatives, predation, reproduction, expansion. They are perfect machines of survival. But they couldn't understand why your brain was generating narratives while you were being tortured. You weren't just suffering. You were weaving a myth about your own suffering to make it bearable. You were inventing a god effect in the middle of a slaughterhouse." She stood up, her shadow stretching long across the cabin floor. "That is the fundamental truth we leave behind for them. We aren't the strongest species, and we aren't the fastest. We are something far more dangerous to the cosmic order." She looked out at the stars, where a dozen more human ships were emerging from warp, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of 1,000 conquered suns. "Humans are conceptual parasites," she said. "We take the raw, meaningless cruelty of the universe and we force it into a story. We find meaning in the void until the void itself feels obligated to provide it. To the Zizx, our ability to survive by manufacturing lies is a biological heresy. We don't just occupy space, we colonize reality by rewriting its significance." She turned back to him, her expression hardening into something crystalline and terrifying. "We are leaving them with that wisdom. They will spend the next 1,000 years trying to understand how a creature so fragile can be so invincible by simply refusing to accept what is true. We aren't just survivors of their harvest. We are the ones who will make their existence irrelevant by making our own myths more real than their physics." The ship surged forward, its engines carving a path through the vacuum. Behind them, the planet withered, a silent monument to a species that had mastered the ultimate weapon, the ability to turn an ending into a beginning and a scream into a psalm. Humanity didn't just move on, they expanded. They took the God effect with them, spreading it like a beautiful, infectious plague across the stars. Every colony, every outpost, every new world became a chapter in the great human novel, a story that would eventually consume everything until there was nothing left but the narrative itself. The Zizks were left in the silence of their ruined halls, haunted by the ghost of a man who had sat on a veranda and talked to a spider, teaching them the most terrifying secret in the galaxy: that for humanity, reality is only a suggestion, and our imagination is the only law that matters.
Thank you for joining us and listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed the reading and invite you to join us again next rotation for another story from Amy Serorts. Tales from Tomorrow.